This night occurred about 7 years ago on my way home from my parents. I was 22, young, naive, and, well, kinda dumb. I was the first in my family to move away from our sleepy old train town that I grew up in, so I went home every Sunday to visit with the family, but mostly to do laundry and eat Sunday dinner. I lived about 45 to 60 minutes up the highway, so generally I was headed home by 6. On this night in particular, there was a summer thunderstorm that had been pouring down rain relentlessly, all day long. My cousins dropped in just as I was packing up to leave after dinner, so I ended up sticking around for a few more hours just to visit. I left my mom's at around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain. This was the first time after moving away from home that I encountered something that truly scared me. I don't know why I never told anyone about this. I think it maybe had something to do with pride. Everyone was always giving me trouble about living alone as a single female in a newish area. Anyway, here goes. I left my parents at around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain. Side note, I hate driving in the rain. So I'm just driving down the service road that leads out of town and eventually turns into the on-ramp to the highway. As you're leaving town, the service road turns into one lane right in front of this quarry train loading station thing. I'm not really clear on what this place is. It always gave me the creeps though. If you're ever unfortunate enough to pass through when a train is crossing the road to load, you'll be stuck there a while. Once the road passes by the tracks, it turns back into 2 lanes and goes up a steep hill. As I was approaching the quarry, I could make out the orange lights on a red cab 18-wheeler sitting in the quarry parking lot. Mind you, it was pouring rain. The visibility was quite low, so I couldn't make out the trucker until I was pretty close to him. As soon as I could make out it was a trucker, it pulled out into the road. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting the trailer in the back of the truck. I skidded around on the road until I regained control of the car. Thanks for the driver's ed classes, Mom. So now I'm stuck behind this dumbass that just pulled out without paying attention. At least I assume so. I keep my distance behind him because I'm a little bit flustered about his driving. For the record, my headlights were on as well, so if he had been paying attention, he should have been able to see me. Honestly though, with the heavy rain and low visibility, who knows? So I'm stuck behind this guy as we begin to cross the tracks and climb this steep hill. Despite it turning into 2 lanes on the hill, he was driving right in the center of both lanes. I figured maybe he just didn't realize it was 2 lanes, so I puttered along behind him, keeping my distance. As soon as we reached the peak of the hill and the road began to level out, he moved over to the right lane. Yes, finally! I move over and begin to pass him. As soon as I get past the front of the truck, he swerves behind me quite abruptly and begins flashing his high beams at me. Usually when someone flashes their lights behind you, in our area anyway, this means to turn on your lights, but mine were already on. I checked as soon as he started flashing me. Weirded out, I put my blinker on and safely changed lanes to get out of his way. He followed behind me and began laying into his horn. The honking startled me, and I began to get a lot more flustered. What the hell did this guy want exactly? I already moved out of his way. My headlights are on. So why didn't I just speed away and zip off, you may be asking? Well, I grew up in this area. It had been raining heavily all day long, and I knew the service roads flooded a little in heavy rain, both on the shoulders and in random spots in the middle of the road. I mean, it's a small Midwestern town. Our roads are shitty. I had already skidded and nearly wrecked once, so I wasn't about to floor it on this bumpy-ass service road that floods and risk wrecking again. There was also nothing between that quarry and the highway, about 4 or 5 miles of deserted wooded area, so if I wrecked it would just be him and me. This went on for the next 4 or 5 miles to the highway. He began tailgating me in addition to the high beams and honking. Once the tailgating began, I was in tears. I had no idea what this guy wanted from me. I was trying to stay out of his way and get home safely. That was all I wanted. I changed lanes 2 more times, making 3 total. He followed me from lane to lane. As we approached the highway though, I floored it. He couldn't accelerate quickly enough to keep up, so I lost him. Finally. As soon as I realized I'd lost him and I was safe on the highway, I just lost it. I was a hysterical wreck. There's only one exit after getting on the highway to stop in the small town the highway runs through. After that, it's all wooded for a good 30 minutes. I thought about getting off at that exit just to calm down and pull it together, but I just wanted to get home, so I sped right past it. I should have stopped. Once the city was no longer visible in my rearview mirror, I was much more calm. I managed to scramble my cell out of my purse and put it in my lap just in case. The rain led up to a drizzle the further I went, but I was still pretty on edge. There weren't very many cars in the highway at this time, and the majority of them were truckers. I was cruising along in the center lane when the truck next to me in the passing lane began blaring the horn and moved into my lane, forcing me over to the third. He continued moving over, nearly forcing me off the highway. I sped up and changed lanes right in front of him so that I was back in the center lane. I slowed down so I was in line with the front cab. I double-clicked the home button on my phone and rolled down my window. I started taking pictures of the cabbie. I think the flashes made him realize what I was doing, and he began slowing down until he was behind me again. I got a lot of pictures. I sped up and lost sight of him behind me. I was satisfied that I'd managed to get pics, but I was so angry at this point. I pulled over to the shoulder of the highway and waited for him. I just wanted to get behind him so I could get a pic of the license plate and report this asshole. Sadly, he was onto me. For sure, I noticed his headlights behind me, a long ways back, but behind me nonetheless, on the shoulder of the highway. I waited, keeping an eye on the truckers passing me by, just to be sure I never missed him. I noticed a shadow eventually pass by the headlights of the truck. This spooked me quite a bit. I thought he'd gotten out of his cab. I didn't stick around to find out though. I took off as fast as I could and got home as quickly as possible. Turned out the pictures were a failure. It was still drizzling. The flash combined with the drizzle just resulted in washed out pictures. I could see the red cab, but no matter what filters I used, there was no making out exactly what it said. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm female and I drive for Lyft at night. I'm on the shorter side at 5'4", and I've been driving for nearly 6 months now. I tend to drive downtown Denver, especially on weekends when there's the most money to make. In this time, I've only had a couple truly scary encounters, and I drive 7 nights a week, at least a couple hours a night. The first scary one started off normally enough for that late at night. I had just dropped off a passenger in Aurora and was making my way back towards Market Street since the bars hadn't closed yet. I get a pickup that's on the way, and it's a nice enough area that I don't feel uncomfortable. Anyone who knows Aurora, Colorado, though, knows it's not really the best area even with the few nice ones. A couple of guys hopped in, one in front, one in back. Both had on hoodies and were carrying backpacks. In Colorado, though, at almost 1:30 in the morning, that's not that odd. Where it gets odd is after they get in. I gave my normal greeting, but they completely ignored me and shoved their backpacks onto the floor. They pulled their hoods up while shielding their faces from the windows with their hands. I was instantly uncomfortable, and I could tell something was off. It was only a 10-minute drive, and we were in a secluded area, so I figured the safest thing to do would be to complete the ride. I could feel my fight-or-flight instinct kicking in, though. Within about a minute, I had decided if they tried anything, I was going to crash my car. Neither one had put on a seatbelt, so I figured that would be my best chance. Once we arrived at the location they wanted to be dropped off at, I could tell it was not a good area. Bars on all the windows, trash strewn everywhere, every car in disrepair. They got out but didn't shut my doors and started whispering to each other while glancing at me. One of them had his hand in his pocket, fidgeting with something. What, I have no idea. At this point, I'd had enough though. I stepped on the gas, driving off with the doors open. I drove a couple miles until I got to a gas station with lights and people before I stopped to properly close both doors. I called it a night and headed home to cuddle my toddler and my husband before having a good cry in the safety of my own bed. I have no idea what they were planning, but I do know I was terrified from the moment they pulled their hoods up to the moment I drove off with my doors open. The second story takes place a couple weeks after the first one. I had sworn off all pickups in Aurora and shady parts along Colfax that night. I would still drop people off there, but I would also turn my app off and leave the area when I was done. I was downtown as usual for a Saturday night and the bars were closing. I got a shared ride, which can be very good at bar closing. Now the thing to know about shared rides is you can't request more than 2 seats, leaving room for 2 more people. I have on multiple occasions had a car full with these types of rides. I get to the person and unlock my doors as normal, and in get 3 people. Okay, that's a small problem to start off. I was polite and told them I couldn't give them a ride with 3 people, so they'd have to order a different lift. This is where this one turns. I don't want to pay more. I'm sorry, but either one of you has to get out or all of you do, and you need to order a different ride. This is a shared ride, and that means you can only have 2 passengers, and they need seats. With shared rides, you're only allowed to book 2 seats for 2 passengers. Look, I'm not paying more, so you can just ignore the other rides and take us home. At this point, he became aggressive and was putting his finger in my face. Maybe I should have been more scared, but this is Market Street at bar close and it was packed. There were drunk people everywhere, and where there are drunk people, there are also lots of cops. I rolled down my window as he continued to tell me what I'm going to do and started threatening to put my bitch ass in my place if I didn't start driving right now. I didn't catch that though, since I had made eye contact with a cop and was focusing on getting his attention. I said this to him. Okay, now you have a choice. You can all get out or I can get that cop right there and get you out. Said cop was making his way over, seeing something was wrong. They all jumped out with the guy flipping me off and they disappeared into the crowd still looking for rides. The cop stopped to ask if I was okay and I gave him a short rundown of what happened and thanked him for coming over. I headed off to my next ride. It was a very polite gentleman. In both cases, I reported them to Lyft so I wouldn't get paired with either again. I also carry a foam pepper spray for defense and have a dash cam that records the interior of my car now. Since that last one though, I haven't had any issues. So, there's that. This is much tamer than others I've read on here, but please let me know if this isn't the right group. This happened a few years ago now. So, I live alone with my 2 cats. We live in a flat, but the front door is on the street level, so when you open the door, you go up the stairs and you're already inside the flat. I don't have a garden either. Now, I'm in my mid-30s, female, very small, petite, and lucky enough to still look young. I mean, I even still get ID'd for cigarettes and alcohol. I also smoke outside by the front door as I don't like smoking inside, even when it's raining. I can't exactly say I live in a rough part of town, so it's fairly usual to say hello to people walking by. They're used to seeing me smoking outside, so we often exchange friendly greetings. People also regularly use this area as a shortcut. My last cigarette was around 11:30 before I went to bed. Of course, when it's really dark, it can feel unnerving, but like I said, it was a very nice area. My flat was one of only 2 in this area. It's not the best looking. The rest were houses, beautiful houses, pretty decoration, nice cars, pretty flowers. Basically, richer and a lot nicer looking than mine. I'm pretty poor and you can definitely tell. For a few weeks before this incident, I kept hearing my front door handle moving, as though someone had been trying to open it. I put it down to kids walking to school. Then though, it'd be in the middle of the day, then the evening. But each time I got to the bottom of the stairs to check, no one was around. This one night, I went for my last cigarette, 11:30, and got ready to go to bed. I fell asleep quickly. At one point, I woke up slightly because I heard the cats playing. I rolled over and went back to sleep. They woke me up again. I could still hear them playing, but now I also heard them growling. Whilst they were laying next to me in bed, I sat bolt upright and realized the sounds were coming from my front door. The cats were still growling. I snuck into the hall and peered down the stairs. I could see the front door handle turning. For the first time in my life, my brain thought much faster than my mouth, and I switched the stairs light on. There was a brief pause with my door open a few inches. Then I heard the feet running away. I ran down the stairs and slammed the door shut, then ran back upstairs to call the police. This was at around 1 a.m. in the morning. The police finally came at about 5. I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair watching the stairs all night, absolutely terrified whoever it was would come back. I didn't even go for a cigarette, even though I desperately wanted one. I was too afraid they'd be there waiting. The police showed me how they'd gotten in. They'd damaged the door frame, and I don't know what it's called, that bit of material or plastic that seals the door, that was all cut and ripped up. I called my landlord first thing in the morning and had deadbolts fitted. I'm now overly cautious when I smoke. I don't stay in one place anymore. I go for a walk a little each time. I don't stick to the same timings either, and I definitely listen to my cats better. If they're growling, there's probably a reason for it. I'm so glad they growled that night though. If they hadn't, I'd have ignored it and gone back to sleep again. Then I'd have woken up with someone in my home doing who knows what, for who knows what reasons. As a young gay man of 25 at the time who's not into the club scene, naturally I turned to dating apps in order to meet and connect with people. I've met many over the years, but none who put a chill down my spine quite like Cody. Cody's profile sported a kind of half smile. I like the seemingly shy types. We were about the same age, and Cody wanted to grab a bite to eat at random. I was down for it. I needed to eat, might as well be with a new friend, possibly lover, right? Well, the first sign something was off came before we even actually met. I told him my legal name and my nickname, not an uncommon or weird one at all. He said, "Well, I want to call you your real name." I denied his request politely, saying I prefer my nickname only, but this was the first sign I should have canceled the date. The second sign came when he insisted on picking me up himself. I told him it was no bother for me to drive to the Wendy's. I know, romantic location, right? But he said he really wanted to go for a night drive. I knew the area pretty well after living there for a few months, so I decided to let him pick me up. Cody takes me to the Wendy's drive-thru and says he isn't hungry, but I can get something if I want. I was a bit weirded out by this because he'd said he wanted to grab a bite to eat, but I still needed to eat anyway, so I ordered. Then the third clue came along and I let it pass me right by. I tried to hand Cody my card to pay for the meal, and he denied it, saying he was paying. When he pulled up to the window, he stuck his card out to the cashier, looked over, and smiled at me rather smug, as though he'd won a battle I wasn't even fighting with him. We sit and I eat. Cody tells me about his hobbies and his time on the dating apps. I realized very quickly this was not the guy for me. He looked barely anything like his picture, and at this point he was being very pushy. Between not calling me my nickname, insisting he drive me everywhere, and insisting he pay for everything, he was also smoking quite heavily, which for me is a big turnoff. I finished my nuggets and found I was not hungry for the fries. It was too early for me to politely leave, but Cody just didn't want to sit still. He wanted to go on a joyride. I agreed to this since the weather was really nice. Cody took this as an opportunity to hop on the interstate and drive straight out of town with me. Now, I didn't panic at this even though I'm new to the area. I still knew generally where we were going, and I've got a keen sense of direction and an iPhone in my pocket. Then though, Cody decided to drive off the interstate and started driving down a heavily wooded road. My discomfort level went through the roof. I looked at my phone. So, where are we going? There's a nice place down here to relax. Well, what's this place called? Oh, it's called Sadie's. Okay, well, I've been there before and this road definitely won't take us there. We're on the way to Colchester." Cody took his eyes off the road and stared up at me in shock for a moment. He stopped the car and said, "Nope, not going this way. That's where the Bunny Man lives." Apparently there was an urban legend about a man in the 70s who dressed in a rabbit suit and threatened to kill people with axes, though there had never been any actual deaths. He immediately turned around and headed back up the road where we came from. At this point, it had been long enough for me to finally say, "Well, this has been nice, but I'd like to get going home now." Cody agreed to take me home. We got back to the exit onto the interstate, but he deliberately drove the wrong way. "Hey, the city is that way." I pointed to the opposite direction. "Well, I know another way to get there." "That's not possible. The county is north of us and you're driving south." "Well, you don't know that." "I can see all the surrounding roads on my phone, dumbass. None of them go that way. We have to turn around." I don't remember what he said to this, but he did turn around and go the other way. 10 minutes of uncomfortable silence followed, and I finally saw my exit coming up. Cody said nothing. My exit came closer. He passed it by. At this point, I was both scared and furious. "What gives, dude? That's the exit to my place." "Well, I don't drive on roads I don't know." "What are you talking about? My apartment is right there. It's where you picked me up tonight. You've been there before." Cody just completely lost it. He lost his shit at me. At this point, I took a deep breath and considered my options. I can't jump out of a moving vehicle. This guy didn't have any more muscle than I did, but if he had a weapon, I was fucked. Instead, I took my phone out and turned on the map, routing the quickest new route to my apartment. I told myself that if he made one more wrong turn, I was calling the police and saying someone won't let me out of their car. Cody took the next exit. We passed by the Wendy's from earlier and stopped at a light. I considered gunning for it, just jumping out, flipping him the bird, and calling my roommate to pick me up. I was in a public area now, so he couldn't exactly pull anything. I still wish I had done that to this day, but I did not. Cody took me back to my apartment complex and dropped me off in the garage. I said nothing as I got out and left the bag of Wendy's fries behind. I was living in a gated community at the time, and instead of heading to my gate, I go to the clubhouse around the corner to get out of sight. Then I immediately went inside since the door locks behind me. There's a few things I do and don't know about that night. The first is that Cody was a complete and total control freak. He tried to deny calling me my preferred name, wouldn't let me pay for anything, and wouldn't let me drive either. He also became increasingly angry anytime he was told to do something, such as take me home. I'll never know what Cody wanted for that night. I don't know if he was trying to take me to some place where friends of his would rob me or worse. I just know that many times he tried to take me someplace I knew wasn't home. I remember shaking for a solid 2 hours when I got home, unable to comprehend what just happened. I'm somewhat glad of the Bunny Man legend, because it clearly scared him into turning around and going the other way. Maybe he really had no idea where he was going after all. I don't know. This was a good 8 years ago, and the memory of Cody still haunts me sometimes. I check the news in that county occasionally to see if anyone has disappeared just in case. I did the monumentally stupid thing of getting into a stranger's car, and I'll never know what price I could have paid if I didn't have the situational awareness when push came to shove.